So this is an adventure book. Like you said, it's not a mystery, but it's definitely got adventure to it. Do you have a preference for reading historical romances that have high adventure?
So that's a good question. I can answer for Lane here because it's not that we need adventure in the book, but we really like it when the main characters are on the same side and on the same page and working together to obtain or to get something, right? So the conflict of the book is not them in conflict with each other, but them trying together to overcome some conflict.
I was gonna say the exact same thing. Well, and so, but to be clear, Meg and I bonded over this book because I am a huge sucker for ancient Egypt in any context, romance or otherwise. And so I was telling Meg about the series I love that is not a romance series. She recommended this, and this is how we learned we both loved romance novels. So while I certainly like plenty of romance novels without high adventure, like, yeah, dashing archaeologist, especially if it's archaeologist spy in Egypt, is my number one favorite thing of all time.
No, that makes sense. I I have not read very much romance from like the 80s and 90s and a little bit more in the 2000s, but I've read a lot about it, but I haven't read that many. But I have this sense that particularly the 70s, 80s, there was a lot of the historical romance had to have adventure. There were pirate ships, there were, stolen horses, there were like they were epic sagas with so much adventure. And so I'm curious, do you feel like there are still these high adventures being delivered in historical romance today?
I want to defer to Meg because, like you, my context isn't great. Like I haven't read very much written even in the early 2000s that Meg hasn't put in my hand.
Hmm.
But I do think when high adventure appears, my sense from what I've read about the earlier eras is that the women have a lot more agency. That the adventures of the 70s and 80s and 90s were a lot of the man is a swashbuckler and the woman is a damsel in distress. And so I do think when there are conflicts like that in more modern romance, it's less passive on the part of the woman. But I defer to Meg on the rest of your question.
Yeah, I mean that's it's an interesting question. I'm currently reading all of Laura Kinsale's books, which are really fascinating from a plot perspective because there's so much plot in those books, right? Like so much stuff just happens. There are plenty of books I think that are quieter and don't have as much adventure. I will say that I, I think there still are authors writing those adventure books, right? There are spy books. There, like Emily Sullivan wrote a whole series with spies with it that we both just absolutely adore.
I think
It's
a
a
lot
great
of road
book.
trip romances end up veering into adventure territory.
Yeah, I will say, so one of the things I do think is I think that a lot of historical romance authors who are writing right now are more aware of the cultural context of the era in which they're writing. And so I think we're less likely to see someone who's a blockade runner. We're less likely to see pirates because we know like what the pirates were selling and like what they were smuggling. So I think that there is a little bit more awareness there, and so we might be less likely to see these sort of epic adventures. For example, like we love Mr. Impossible. It's like I think it's one of the best romance novels out there, but I've certainly seen legitimate critiques of it that say, well, it's very colonialist, you know. It's not problematized at all that Rupert and Daphne are in Egypt and you know, adventuring up and down and going into tombs and stuff like that. So I think there is a little bit more thought put into, okay, what kind of adventure can they have? And I think they may be a little bit smaller and closer to home because it's a little easier to control for those circumstances.
Yeah, and to not go into the pitfalls of othering these
Right.
cultures.